The morning it happened felt like every other. Sprinklers ticking, newspapers thudding onto clean driveways. A town humming with the soft confidence of people who believe nothing truly bad happens here. But something had already slipped off its axis. A girl was missing, and the quiet had a bruise beneath it. A purple pressure you felt more than heard. Neighbors traded theories in careful tones, allergic to panic, certain she'd stroll home at dinner with a plausible excuse. Doors stayed unlocked. Smiles were exchanged. The real horror wasn't a masked intruder or a dark alley. It wore weekend clothes, waved from porches, and offered to help carry groceries. That's the trick of ordinary places. They teach you to ignore the stray note in the choir. And while the town rehearsed its routines, the absence pressed in, turning familiar streets into a maze where everyone knew the path, except the one person who needed it most. By noon, rumors had invented routes she could have taken, arguments she might have had, reasons that sounded comforting because they were ordinary. People prefer a story with errands and misunderstandings, not one with teeth. The search grid grew in rectangles on a map, a geometry of hope taped to the station wall. The house where she was last seen became a magnet. Eyes clung to it, then glanced away. The coach waved when cars slowed, the friendly neighbor checking in, steady as ever. While the questions threaded themselves into a knot, no one tried to pull too hard. The chief urged calm. The local forum bloomed with theories, and the sun kept crossing the sky like it had a schedule. Somewhere, an answer was already placed in plain sight, like a dropped coin glinting in grass that no one thought to part. Evening carried a hush that felt rehearsed, as if the town had practiced being quiet together. Patrols rolled by with lights dimmed, and porch lamps switched on like shared ritual. The story kept adjusting itself to stay harmless. She ran off. She needed space. She'll text soon, yet little fractures showed. Dogs sniffing at the same drain. A mother staring too long at an empty driveway. A coach whose routine was a little too precise. The investigator's work, in the end, is patience sharpened by doubt. To hold a smile in the light until the gloss turns sticky. When the first piece surfaced, small, ordinary, the kind of thing that belonged anywhere, it made a sound in the mind louder than any siren. A click that said the picture was closer than anyone wanted to admit. The timeline argued with itself. Digital footprints promised certainty, and then smudged it with gaps wide enough to hide in. A ping here, a camera there, a minute that stretched like taffy between them. People cling to minutes that behave. She left the store at 7:40. She was seen near the park, unless that was someone else in the same jacket. The map began to look less like a path, and more like a set of overlapping alibis. Still, the rhythm of the place persisted. Trash night, porch talk, a whistle from the field. That ordinary music made every wrong note sharper. And when the wrong note came from the one person everyone trusted, it was quiet enough to be mistaken for kindness. Just a helpful suggestion about where to search next. Just a hand steadying a wavering hope. Night settled with that particular suburban stillness where every sound seems polite about existing. The grid was set for morning. The town could sleep inside its neat lines of effort. But the absence didn't sleep. It stood like a figure at the end of the hall, barely there until you stared. The house on the corner kept its porch, light burning, as if it could signal a return. A car door clicked, a dog barked and fell quiet, and somewhere a garage door rolled down with finality. The story had now split in two, the one everyone could say out loud, and the darker one forming word by word in silence. Only one of them would still fit by dawn. And when it did, people would swear they had felt something wrong, right here, and simply chosen not to know. Morning returned like an apology, soft, golden, pretending nothing had happened. The search widened, and with it came the flood of half-memories. Who saw her, who waved, who thought they did. Every face became a question. Detective Claire Madsen sifted through statements that sounded rehearsed, smiles that lasted one beat too long. The town's charm, once a comfort, now felt like camouflage. Patterns emerged in the ordinary, repeated paths, overlapping errands, the same name written in volunteer lists and neighborhood watch forms. What had looked like kindness began to resemble control, and beneath the rhythm of normalcy, the first ripple of dread began to hum, quiet but relentless, like a current pulling everything toward a truth no one wanted to face. He spoke like someone helping, his voice smooth with civic pride. Every sentence bent toward reassurance, a gentle tug back toward normal. He'd known Mara, coached her once, drove her home that one rainy evening. It was all so innocent, he said. Yet words like his don't vanish. They leave faint fingerprints, oily on memory. Claire felt it. The slight pause before he said her name. The glance to the glass where he knew someone watched. It wasn't guilt that gave him away. Not yet, but the lack of fear. People afraid of being accused tremble. He didn't. He sat in the light, smiling like a man convinced the truth would always be kind to him. By midday, the news vans arrived. Reporters set up tripods beside manicured hedges, their bright jackets and scripted urgency painting over grief with spectacle. Cameras love symmetry. Missing posters, weeping parents, a town united. Claire watched from the station steps as the image of order built itself again. Ethan waved to a crew as he walked by, the perfect neighbor helping the search, offering coffee to volunteers. Every gesture looked good on camera. That's the danger of charm. It doesn't hide guilt, it replaces it. And somewhere inside that theater of concern, Claire sensed the faint dissonance. The way he looked not at people, but at their belief in him, polishing it like a mirror he couldn't afford to crack. The house felt colder than the air outside. Laura let Claire in without speaking, her movements soft, almost rehearsed. Inside, the perfection hurt, pillows aligned, no dust on shelves, photographs in precise symmetry, control disguised as comfort. Claire's eyes tracked the smallest inconsistencies, a missing frame on the wall, faint scratches near the doorframe, the smell of bleach that didn't match the season. Laura's voice trembled when she spoke about Mara, about how kind her husband had been. Kindness again. Always that word. The silence that followed stretched too long, and in it, Claire felt the echo of something unsaid. The kind of truth that lingers in rooms even after the words die. That night, she stayed late at her desk, reviewing patterns, roots, messages, timestamps that refused to align. Somewhere in the data was intent disguised as coincidence. She replayed a clip, Ethan waving at a passing car outside his house. In the reflection of his window, a second shape moved. It was faint, uncertain, but enough to hold her still. Patterns never lie, not when the surface begins to crack. Outside, rain pressed against the glass like a warning. Inside, she circled a single time stamp, 7:42 p.m., the same minute that kept returning like a whisper. It wasn't evidence yet, but it was a heartbeat, and the case had just found its pulse. Truth rarely arrives with thunder. It leaks in, quiet, corrosive, steady. Claire didn't sleep. She replayed that reflection until her eyes blurred. Each angle, each second, spoke in a different dialect of fear. The town still smiled, still trusted. Ethan still waved, but something invisible had shifted. Like a note gone flat in a familiar song. She began walking his route at dawn, tracing his mornings, his errands, the places he lingered too long. Every stop fit perfectly into the shape of innocence, yet every perfect thing felt rehearsed. And when she reached the park bench where he often sat, she saw what no one else did. Not the comfort of routine, but the architecture of obsession. By afternoon, patterns became paths, bank withdrawals, volunteer rosters, text logs, all converging on one truth, hiding beneath kindness. She brought her findings to Henry Cobb, her voice steady, her evidence brittle, but his eyes softened instead of sharpening. "He's a friend," he said, and the word friend hit harder than any denial. That was the sickness here. Loyalty mistaken for goodness. Claire left the office with the echo of that word following her like a shadow. Outside, the town carried on. Kids laughing, dogs barking, neighbors waving. Normalcy resumed its performance, and for the first time she realized how many people would rather protect their comfort than face what was standing in front of them. Claire began shadowing Ethan not by orders but by instinct. He lived his life like a sermon to decency. Handshakes, waves, trash cans neatly lined. But people who hide always tidy their corners first. She watched from her car as he helped an elderly neighbor, fixed a gate, smiled for the kind of approval that keeps masks glued in place. Yet between gestures, there were gaps, a twitch of impatience, a glance at something unseen. Predators don't stalk in the woods anymore. They build trust in daylight. And as dusk painted his house in amber, Claire saw the light flicker in his garage just once, a moment so small it could be ignored, if it weren't for how her pulse answered it. That night, the rain returned. Claire waited outside his house long after the town went dark. The rhythmic patter on the car roof blurred time. At 2:17 a.m., Ethan stepped into the driveway, coat collar raised, trash bag in hand. No collection day tomorrow. She watched him cross the lawn and lift the lid of the neighbor's bin instead of his own. The sound, a single, soft thud, cut through the rain like a heartbeat out of rhythm. He looked around once, expression calm, then turned back inside. Claire sat frozen, pulse loud enough to fill the car. In that single motion, normal had died. What remained was the raw hum of truth, and the beginning of something irreversible. By dawn, the air carried the stillness before confession. She retrieved the bag before the garbage trucks came. Rubber gloves, no backup. Just her and the cold hum of fear. Inside, beneath ordinary trash, something small and unmistakably human. A bracelet charm, the missing star. It wasn't proof enough for court, but it was enough for her heart to go quiet. The monster had always been there, smiling beside her. She watched the sun rise over identical rooftops and understood how the town's blindness had been built, not from ignorance, but from comfort. Evil didn't hide in shadows here. It sat beside them at dinner, laughed at their jokes, and waved good morning. Morning came heavy, like guilt that refused to lift. The charms sat on Claire's desk, a small, gleaming truth the town wasn't ready to see. She'd called forensics, logged it officially, but deep down she knew the resistance waiting beyond that door. The narrative was too tidy, too beloved to unravel. Ethan Rowe wasn't a suspect. He was a fixture. People didn't want monsters in familiar faces. They wanted strangers. Claire stared at the evidence, wondering how long a lie could survive if everyone agreed to protect it. Outside, the church bells rang over trimmed hedges and morning joggers. The town's heart still beat in rhythm, unaware it was already fractured. The chief's office smelled of coffee and denial. Henry Cobb sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, eyes kind but distant. He listened, nodded, then asked the question that cut deepest. "Are you sure?" It wasn't doubt in her competence. It was disbelief in the possibility. The town's golden sun, accused of darkness, it didn't fit their story. Claire argued logic, timelines, data, but logic dies quickly where reputation lives. When she left, his words followed her down the hall. "Don't make this personal," but it was personal. It always is. When truth demands you burn the myths you once believed in. Word spread faster than permission. Whispers in grocery aisles, sidelong glances over fences, quiet disbelief steeped in fear. The rows stopped, attending church. Laura's curtains stayed drawn. Claire felt the town turn on itself. Some angry at the accusation. Others angry they hadn't seen it first. But denial has its own gravity. It pulls even the honest back into silence. Children whispered the missing girl's name like a ghost story. The local news softened every headline. And in the quiet between broadcasts, Claire realized the case had ceased being about proof. It was now about survival. Of image. Of order. Of willful blindness. The next lead came from silence itself. Claire replayed the footage again. The porch camera from 7:42 p.m. The reflection behind Ethan wasn't random. It was timed. A figure moved in rhythm with him. Smaller, deliberate. She amplified, stabilized, slowed it to frames. Not proof yet, but a pattern of movement that no coincidence could mimic. She called the lab, her voice steady, hands trembling beneath the desk. Outside, rain began again, soft against the glass, echoing that fateful night. Truth was surfacing, dragging everything with it. The town, her conscience, and the thin veneer of safety everyone clung to. There was no going back, not now. That evening, Claire visited Laura again. The house felt emptier, air thinner. Laura's voice cracked like glass when she spoke. "He's not who you think," she whispered. Not to defend, but to confess. Years of tiny fears poured out, unspoken patterns that finally formed a shape too dark to ignore. Claire didn't write. She just listened, the truth stitching itself together in broken syllables. Outside, the wind shook the porch light, flickering against the framed smile of Ethan Rowe in the hallway photo. The mask was slipping, slow, inevitable, merciless. And in the faint tremor of Laura's voice, Claire heard what the town had refused all along. Evil had been home the whole time. The confession didn't come in words. It came in tremors. Laura's hands shook as she handed Claire the small key, its brass worn smooth by years of being hidden. "He said it was for work," she whispered. In her voice was a lifetime of obedience, the sound of someone who had mistaken control for care. "The key fit a small lockbox in the garage," she said. Claire drove there alone, the engine loud in the silence. Every turn of the key in her pocket felt heavier than a gun. Some truths don't need witnesses. They only need courage. And when she opened that box, she found what the town had buried beneath kindness. The quiet evidence of a predator's patience. Inside the box, truth lay arranged like trophies. Bracelet pieces, ribbons, old team photos, and something darker she refused to describe in her report. Each item told a story of attention turned predatory, of trust turned weapon. She stared until her vision blurred, the weight of 100 smiles pressing down. Outside, a car door slammed. Footsteps approached. Claire froze, the flashlight trembling in her grip. The handle turned, slow, deliberate. When Ethan's silhouette filled the doorway, time stopped. For one heartbeat, they were still. The hunter and the witness, both knowing the mask had finally cracked. Then he smiled, and in that calm, practiced curve of his mouth, she saw everything. He spoke softly, as though reason might rewind time. "You shouldn't be here, Claire." His voice carried no fear, only weary control. Every step he took forward felt rehearsed, a choreography of power built on years of trust. She held her ground, hand inching toward her radio, eyes locked on him. "You've been watching the wrong story," he said, tone almost kind. "Everyone always does." The words slithered into the silence, heavy with arrogance. For a moment she saw the man the town adored and the monster he'd always been, occupying the same skin. Her voice came out steady. "Then let's end your version." And when the sirens finally broke the quiet, he didn't flinch. The arrest didn't feel triumphant. It felt like the air had gone thin. Officers filled the driveway, lights painting red and blue ghosts across the walls. Laura watched from the porch, her expression hollow, like someone freed but emptied. Henry Cobb stood back, face carved in disbelief, unable to reconcile the friend with the handcuffs. Ethan didn't resist. He only looked at Claire and said, "You all wanted someone to believe in. I just gave you that." It wasn't defiance, it was confession, disguised as pride. And as the cruiser door closed, Claire felt no relief, only the sharp ache of understanding. Evil doesn't hide. It performs. By dawn, the storm had cleared, leaving streets slick with reflection. The town awoke to headlines and disbelief, neighbors whispering in driveways, children walking to school under the same sky that had hidden so much. Claire stood by the river, the one that ran quietly through town, watching its surface ripple with light. The case was over, but not the story. The cracks in their perfect mirror would never mend. Somewhere behind her, church bells rang again, solemn now. She closed her notebook, the charm sealed away in evidence, the echo of denial still lingering in her ears. Some truths don't bring closure. They bring clarity. And clarity, in the end, is the cruelest kind of peace. The headlines screamed justice, but justice rarely screams back. In the weeks that followed, silence settled heavier than before. The town went on. Yard sales resumed, porch lights glowed, and people pretended peace had returned. But beneath the surface, everything trembled. Claire found herself walking past the same driveways, the same smiles that had once looked innocent. Now, they looked rehearsed. No one wanted to talk about how they'd missed the signs, how kindness had blinded them. They wanted a villain, not a mirror. Yet every reflection she saw carried a piece of that failure, and the truth whispered with each step. They hadn't been fooled. They'd chosen not to look. The interviews came next. Reporters eager for quotes. Families eager for closure. But closure is a word people use when they can't face consequence. Claire watched as neighbors described Ethan as helpful, trustworthy, always smiling. Their words built a eulogy for innocence, not the girl I'd lost. Mara's parents didn't attend the interviews. Grief had outgrown language. The town's collective defense became a prayer. If they said it enough times, maybe it would erase what had done. But lies don't die easy. They just learn to live among the flowers left on memorials. And every soundbite of denial was another line in the obituary of truth. Inside the station, Claire faced a different kind of reckoning. The internal report called her actions unorthodox, her instincts emotional, the same instincts that caught a killer. Bureaucracy prefers order, even when order shelters evil. Cobb avoided her eyes, his loyalty still bleeding quietly. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "But you made enemies doing it." She signed her name at the bottom of the review and left the pen on the desk. Justice, she realized, wasn't about punishment. It was about endurance. And sometimes endurance meant walking away before the truth was filed into something easier to forget. At the memorial, the air smelled of wet grass and regret. The town gathered to honor the girl they'd forgotten until it was too late. Claire stood apart, watching candles flicker beneath framed photos, faces bowed in silence that arrived years late. Laura attended, veiled in quiet grief, her hands clasped so tight, her knuckles white. Cobb stood beside her, his uniform freshly pressed. For a fleeting moment, it looked like redemption, but redemption without truth is theater. The pastor spoke of forgiveness. Claire thought of consequence, and as the wind lifted the candles' smoke toward the clouds, she wondered if the town was mourning the girl, or the illusion of their own goodness. After the memorial, the town returned to its rituals. Bake sales, fundraisers, polite laughter. The machine of civility resumed, but for Claire, Something fundamental had changed. She drove the long road out of town at dawn, past the same porches and mailboxes, each one now a monument to the blindness that nearly consumed them. The radio played static between stations, the sky pale and endless. She didn't feel victory, only clarity. Evil doesn't vanish when caught. It just waits for forgetfulness. And somewhere behind her, in that perfect little town, forgetfulness was already setting in. She pressed her foot on the gas, and the rearview mirror swallowed the place whole. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The story faded from headlines, then from conversation, then from memory. That's how silence wins. It waits. The town smiled again, repainted fences, planted flowers over the same soil that once held secrets. Claire had transferred out, her name quietly absent from local talk. But some nights, when wind carried the faint scent of rain, she dreamed of that cul-de-sac, the sprinklers, the posters, the lie everyone agreed to live inside. The case was over. But the pattern wasn't. Evil hadn't left. It had only learned new manners. And somewhere, behind another neat white fence, another story was beginning to hum its first quiet note. Claire settled into her new post by the coast, miles away, but never far enough. The sea became her confessional. Restless, tireless, incapable of keeping secrets. Every morning she walked the shoreline before sunrise, breathing in salt and remembering the stillness of that cursed suburb. She'd learned that justice wasn't about punishment. It was about witnessing, bearing truth when others refused. The tide erased her footprints as fast as she made them, but the act itself mattered. The walking, the remembering, the refusal to let forgetting become peace. That was her penance, and maybe her salvation. Back in the town she left behind, time tried to rewrite memory. The park where it began now held a plaque with Mara's name, polished and polite. Families picnicked nearby, unaware of the ground beneath. Laura moved away quietly. The row house sold to a young couple who loved its charm. Henry Cobb retired, his photo still hanging in the station. Smiling, dependable. History has a way of curating itself, leaving only what fits the story. But ghosts don't honor edits. Some truths cling like humidity, invisible yet suffocating. The plaque gleamed in sunlight, but beneath it, the soil remembered everything. Letters began arriving at Claire's new address. Unsigned, typed. Always brief. Thank you. You were right. I saw things too. None had returned names, only postmarks from towns that looked just like the one she'd left. Each envelope carried the same quiet confession. Blindness wasn't isolated. It was epidemic. Claire kept them in a drawer, unread after the first line, reminders of what silence protects. The truth wasn't just one man. It was the collective comfort that let him exist. And though the world called her a hero, she knew better. Heroes stop monsters. She'd only revealed one hiding place among thousands. One evening, as twilight bled into dusk, Claire stood on her balcony watching the tide pull back. She realized she'd stopped dreaming of the case, not because she'd healed, but because the world had resumed its illusions. Somewhere, another story was beginning, dressed again in routine and trust. The cycle never ends, only relocates. She closed her eyes, whispered Mara's name, and let the wind carry it out to sea. The waves swallowed it softly, the same way time swallows memory. In the distance, lights flickered on across the coastline. Beautiful, fragile, and unaware. The world turned, pretending again that monsters make noise when they move.